and Batman and Superman were punching a bunch of army of Frankensteins while Dracula looked on, and I was like, it's all downhill from here. Like, that's like, if you would ask 10-year-old Brent what he would want to draw in a comic book, it would have been that.
Welcome back, friends. Today I drove over to Minneapolis and thankfully didn't spill my water bottle all over my pants right before I got to my guest place. Today I'm sitting with a comic book artist for the first time. I've had a lot of artists, but no illustrators in the comic book space. But he's done more than comic books. He's obviously done graphic novels. He's also done beer labels, quite a few of them, and some crazy bands posters, including one for Post Malone recently. Welcome to the show, illustrator Brent Schoonover.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Dude, I always try to pronounce it Schoonover every time I look at it.
You're not the only one. Like, I'm immune to it now. I just know. Yeah. Every time the girls get a new teacher for school, it's like Schoonover, and I'm like, yeah, Schoonover.
Yeah.
I always reference that scene in Mallrats where they're looking at the that trippy kind of like, and they're like, it's a schooner, and they're like, no, it's not, it's a sailboat.
So tell me about where we are, where you invited me into your buddy's space. Man, this isn't actually yours, but this is cool as hell.
I work from home, and I have a nice little office in our house, and my wife also has her own business, and so our house was a little chaotic today, and I was like, I don't know if it's a good place to do the podcast, but my buddy Adam Turman, I call him Mr. Minnesota artist, he's great. He's got the studio right down from the street from us. He let us use his space today. So shout out to Adam. Thank you for letting us do the show here.
There's a lot of really great artists in Minnesota, but you're not from Minnesota. You're from Illinois.
Yeah.
And you came up here specifically for college and then just like didn't leave.
Yeah, pretty much. So I grew up, there's Beloit, Wisconsin, which is right on the southwest or southeast part of Wisconsin. And then there's also South Beloit, Illinois, which is right on the border. And I grew up right in South Beloit. It was like a small town of like 4,000 people. I graduated with like 25, 30 kids. And I was just like the weird artist guy who they didn't really know what to do with, but I just knew at a young age I liked to draw. And thankfully, my parents encouraged it. And I came up here to the Minneapolis College of Art and Design and got a degree in illustration and comic book art. And then I met my wife there, and she's hardcore Minnesota, and she will never leave. So therefore, I'm never leaving. So.
Is she more the business brains then behind the whole operation?
100%. That is, she's actually, she did all these awesome internships. Like, she worked at a gallery, and it wasn't because she wanted to have her work in the gallery necessarily. It was because she wanted to learn how a gallery ran. She's a producer for a lot of photo shoots for Target, General Mills. Any of the big companies are up here. She makes sure the models sign all their release forms. She budgets everything out. She's a badass. So she's awesome.
So your success is all due to her 100%. Lining up your deals.
If you give me a job and you get an invoice, that's because she filled it out. I would have forgotten to even do that part. No, I'm very lucky. She's great on that aspect of everything, and she really helps me out with all that.
Yeah, well, and a lot of it is just like the people who are deciding who needs to do something, movie posters or whatever. Yeah. It's like they have a database in their head / maybe in their computer, their phone, where they're like, these are trusted people I've worked with before. And if you're not one of those people, it's really hard to get in to like be a part of that. Let's go way back before that. I do want to hear the story of how you like first discovered comics, because you kind of like briefly mentioned it to me off mic and really interested. So what was the first comic that you ever got?
It started with a really long, boring car ride to the Mount Rushmore when I was probably like 8. And we drove, obviously didn't have phones at the time to keep us entertained, and we stopped at Wall Drug, that famous place.
After everybody seeing 400 billboards.
Exactly. You got to stop. And my dad just gave us, I think me and my brother, like $10 to get candy or whatever. And we saw the spinner rack of comic books, and I kind of knew of them, obviously, because Spider-Man and all those, they have like cartoons and stuff like that. But for whatever reason, I just hadn't really immersed myself with a comic book. But I was like, ooh, that spinner rack. And I grabbed an Incredible Hulk. I think it was issue number 382. It was him, Hulk on top of a building, punching Spider-Man off the building, and just the dynamic look of it and everything. I was like, I need to read that issue. And so I read that thing cover to cover so many times on that trip, and I just fell in love with it. I was like, this is so cool. And I just started tracing it. You know, my dad would bring home vellum paper or something like, and I would just trace over it. And I just became obsessed. And then my brother got into it too, and we'd draw our own characters and stuff like that. And I'm really lucky in the regard that my parents both encouraged us to do art, even though they didn't have an art background. They just were like, oh, they're doing something together. They're not bothering us. I don't know what it was, but they saw something there that was oh, they're having fun, they're being creative. And when I got to art school, I was really surprised how that was not the case for a lot of kids. Like they were discouraged not to do this. It's a waste
because it doesn't
of
make
time.
money for most people.
Exactly.
Right? It's really hard to translate that into a job that has any kind of consistency, that has a retirement, that has blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Like, I've ran the same issue with like my extended family and my direct family of like, when I walked away from working for Verizon when I was 22, making more money than either of my parents.
Right.
They're like, why would you do that?
Why would you do that?
And I'm like, because I hate this.
Yeah.
You know, and trying to convince people that what I do is a real job is a never ending battle.
It is. And it's fine. You know, hopefully you get a gig or two that shows them like, hey, this is why I did this. And, you know, it's cool. But no, it's hard. And it's hard to convince people. And the only thing I can tell people is like, there's that something you love, whether it's art, whether, I don't know, mowing your lawn or something like that.
Yeah.
That feeling, I get to feel that every day, you know, and that's the best feeling, you know, and it's best for my mental health.
Yeah.
Really.
Well, and what I try to tell people is like when you work for yourself, especially in a creative field, you work way more than 40 hours typically.
Yes.
But the truth is most people go to their 40-hour job and then when they're done with work, they do their hobby.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So they're doing stuff 12 hours a day anyways. It's just like when you do something that you actually really care about, like art, now maybe you are pulling 11-hour days, but like you would have been doing that anyways, except now the other 8 isn't at a job you hate. It's just doing something you want.
And as life gets busier and crazier too, that, you know, you may stop that job at a certain time of the day, but then there's other responsibilities and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden that hobby time becomes less and less. And I know so many people who they do have hobby time and stuff and they did it, but like, eventually it's like your diet or whatever, getting 8 hours of sleep, it just is not consistent.
It's just not your priority, right?
No,
it's
100%.
like it's hard to prioritize when you have kids and everything else. Like, where do you put your time? And if you're gonna take time away from playing a board game with your kids to do something, it's gotta like feel valuable.
100%.
And it's really hard to be selfish and do something that you're like, this isn't generating income, this is just because I want to, and it's only really beneficial for me. It's like hard to pull that trigger. So let's talk about how you actually got into working. So you got a degree, which I feel like you don't have to get a degree in something like that to be successful in it, right?
I've never made a resume in my life, which is hilarious. You know, I went to one of the biggest art schools in the country, and you know, I've got the student loan debt to prove it. But like, I've never had to like tell people where I've got my degree from and everything like that. It's really just like, let me see your portfolio. And so, but at the same time, I would have never have gotten where I was without that education. So it's still super important. So
what would be the like biggest things you learned from that you wouldn't have learned if you just started working with a company?
Oh, just like going to school and stuff like that. Well, for me, I mean, obviously I hate to say it, like the technology standpoint and stuff like that. Like we were really, you know, even though I went to MCAT from 1998 to 2002. So that was like early, like Adobe programming, kind of like, I think it's Adobe 5 or something, or Photoshop 5. And so, but it was important and I needed that foundation of learning that kind of stuff. And then, but also getting a good mix of traditional drawing skills and stuff like that. Like I had a watercolor class, I had a painting class and stuff like that. I mean, it's been a long time, obviously, so I don't know where that mix is. I think they still obviously carry those classes, but the technology aspect of it is so much heavier now. And then also, like I said, I grew up in a town of 4,000 people. There was one other dude who I knew liked to draw in class and stuff. And he only like redid like Def Leppard album covers or Motley Crue album covers. And he was a little limited on what he was liking to do and stuff. I mean, I had friends who liked art, but like there wasn't anybody who liked to do it the way I like to do it. And like I was in it. And so then you get to a college and you're on a campus and you're in dorm rooms and everybody is like you. And it's the best. It is
camaraderie and not feeling alone is big, man.
Yeah, and it's like, hey, what are you doing on Thursday night? I don't know. He's like, I need someone to be in my movie for my film class. Can you come to the studio and be in my film? And I'm like, sure. Or, you know, like friends who like learned how to screen print at a young age and stuff like that I, you know, never thought I'd have anything to do with screen printing. And now I'm, you know, in my 40s and I'm doing a ton of screen printed rock posters, and I'm like, very limited knowledge that I picked up of just hanging out with them in the middle of the night, cranking Slayer albums and drinking Mountain Dew and watching them do screen printing posters and stuff like that. I kind of fall back on some of that stuff that I picked up while I was doing that, you know, and it was just a 24/7 art environment for 4 years. And you think, oh, it's got to be like Animal House or something like that. But it was like, no, like you were really learning. It was super fun, but like I learned so much. And then those people all go out and they go out in their industries and stuff like that. And then maybe you don't see somebody for 2 or 3 years, and then all of a sudden there's like, oh, that guy who was in my woodworking class, well, he's a art director at a big agency, and he remembers me, and he remembers I do a good comic book style, and he's like, oh, we have a need for somebody. And it's funny. Like MCAD is a great college because it's a great education, but also you're going to be surrounded by really talented, driven people too, and you never know where they're going to end up and where you may interact down the road.
Yeah, networking, I feel like it has a bad rap to people have a bad feeling when they hear the term networking.
Yeah.
Networking is so important with anything, and especially in a creative field too, just because there's not really that many people making the decisions and all those things. Like there aren't. So if you can have some kind of connection to them, and in something like that, it's like there's this camaraderie, this community, this sense of community where you're networking, but not intentionally.
For sure.
You're just like making friends and getting to know people, and it's putting you around people that do things that aren't the same as you, which is really big too. Yeah. So that way you don't end up going tunnel vision and just if you never go outside of your niche, then you're never going to be able to create something that hasn't been done yet, because you're just going to be copying what this is. But when you can start pulling influences from other things, it helps with the creative juices to be like, oh, but what if I tried this that I saw this person do? I haven't seen it done in a comic, but I think it would work.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and I think it sounds funny, but years ago, me and my wife went to Chicago, and we went to a bar, and the bar was just littered with guys, and it was like the inside of a shoe, like it was a convention for shoes, but it was like all these people were like the insoles of shoes, like that's what they were there to talk about, and they were super drunk, and I'm like, they all have their ties loose, and I'm like, that. This is their time to get together and hang out. And I'm like, they're talking about the inside of shoes, which couldn't be more boring to me. But I'm like, you get a bunch of artists together and we're like talking about our favorite run on Batman or Superman. And I'm like, we're all nerds really, but we're just excited about different things. But for us, it's just like, you're talking about, oh, have you ever seen this guy's stuff? And you're like, no, I haven't seen that. And then you go and you check it out and you're like, oh my gosh, there's it sounds funny, but for me, it's like, oh, the way that guy illustrates trees and stuff. It's like, oh, I've never seen that. And now I'm going to use that for the next time I have a big scene that's heavily involves a forest or something like that. I love pulling from that or something like that, but make it my own.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what every great artist does, right? It's like you copy things, but small things from a lot of different places, so that way the end product, most people can't tell where you pulled it from.
For sure.
But you did pull it from somewhere. That's kind of like anybody. It's like you just don't know. Maybe it came from something obscure that you would never guess, but it came from somewhere. So let's talk about how the career itself started to develop outside of college. You said you didn't provide your resume for anybody. So what was the first thing that you did?
The first thing I did, so I was the first graduating class after 9/11, which was rough because a lot of agencies and a lot of places were just cutting their arts and their commercial budget. That was the first thing to go. And so I really, really struggled. And I remember going downtown and just at the time just handing out CDs or DVDs of my artwork on it, and going up to ad agencies and buildings and just asking if I can talk to an art director. And I would just leave them with people. And I went up to the Pioneer Press in St. Paul, the newspaper, and I had a piece that got into the Society of Illustrators Los Angeles through college. And it was just an illustration spot piece for about an injury or something, like slipping on ice or something. Sure. And the art director saw that and really liked it and was like, hey, Jesse Ventura is leaving office as governor. We would love to have a couple illustrators illustrate what they think Jesse is going to do after he leaves office. And I drew this illustration of Jesse on a man-made canoe with his merch, and he has a little flag, Minnesota flag, and he's just going to go down the Mississippi, and we're never going to hear from him again. He had his feather boa from wrestling and his glasses and stuff. And that job just steamrolled into things. And that's when I go to colleges and talk to the students and stuff, I talk about steamrolling jobs, like building that, it's like building up that snowman, you got to keep building it. And that job led to other jobs that led to another job. And so but that was the first one that got me going.
Yeah. That's why you have to give 100% to every project that you do, even if the client is really small, because you don't know where someone's going to discover your work from. They're just going to see one thing. And if it's not the thing you're proud of, you know what I mean? That is the whole thing of the first impressions, right? So
it's especially when you're young too, you got to hit on those jobs, even if you're not happy with the budget, even if you don't love your timeline. it sucks, but you got to hit it, and there's no excuses. And it happens, I mean, I just did a job the other, like a while ago that I was like, man, that really stunk. But like the client was super happy with it. And I was like, all right, fooled them. I'm good. But like, it's a little harder when you're younger, cause it just, you don't have that body of portfolio to look back at and say, oh, he's pretty consistent, know?
Well, and I know clients don't know what you're capable of either. They're just like artists. So you could just like do any art. And you're like, well, it's not that I can't do it, but I can't do anything. Like my skill is in certain areas. It's not like everything. Like somebody could hire you to do a watercolor mural, and I'm sure you could, but you would know for yourself, like this is not what I do best at all. For sure.
Yeah. Actually, I just did a project with the Milwaukee Brewers, and they asked me if I wanted to do a mural, and I was like, I am not a mural person. Like, you would be better to get somebody else. And I said, the only way I could really make it work is, I was like, if you wanted to do like a digital wrap or something like that. And they're like, well, we don't really want to do a digital wrap, but like, what if you drew it and stuff, and then we have a local artist that we're really excited about that wants to collaborate, and then they will paint it. And so it's supposed to be going up in June, but I'm really excited. I'm really like, I did it and I was really happy with how it turned out, and now it's in their hands. So I mean, I've never done anything like that before, but I'm excited to see how it's going to turn out.
Dude, I'm good at tracing. So if I have an illustration from you and I throw it on a projector, I got crispy lines. We could definitely make it happen. I just watched Predator last night.
I just watched
my
it
girlfriend
recently.
Really?
Yeah.
My girlfriend had never seen it, and I'm a big Alien fan, and I recently interviewed the actor Trevor Newland, who played the alien in Alien Romulus, the newest one. So anyway, we kind of go on like little binges of TV shows, and my girlfriend picks the one. When that's done, I pick the next one. And so it's my turn, and I was like, we're going to watch every Alien film, and that includes Predator films. So we watched that last night, and then I forgot that Jesse Ventura's in that movie with Arnold. I'm like, how do we have two governors in Predator right now? Like, this is incredible. So when was the first time that you actually got to work on a comic? I know you did some stuff that was just like your own, like you created it because you wanted to, but like, was it a long time before you actually got paid or hired to do that type of work?
So when I graduated from Minneapolis College of Art and Design in 2002, a buddy of mine who was a filmmaker, we both huge comic book nerds, and so we did a book called Horrorwood, which was sort of like this 1950s horror story about out of work actors and special effects artists and directors who sort of find this like cult in Hollywood. It kind of was like the Red Scare, kind of a play off of that. And we did that book, and we created that by ourselves. And then I went to San Diego Comic-Con after we got the first issue done, and I pitched it to a company at the time, right on the floor, and they were like, we love it, we want to publish it. And so we completely did the first issue on our own, and then took it there and pitched it. It was kind of like pitching a movie, and it just got picked up on the floor of San Diego Comic-Con, the biggest comic convention. And that was just like the coolest moment of my life. And then the day before, I bumped into Stan Lee when I first got there within 5 minutes of being at the convention. Wow. He was super awesome. I got a picture with him, and I was just like, this is the best weekend ever. And so we did that book, and that did, like all first time creators, like we did it, and it was great. It was a learning experience. And then that led into a couple other smaller books and stuff, but it wasn't like 2 or 3 books in. I got an opportunity to work on Toy Story comics for a company called Boom Studios, which had just acquired the Pixar license. Oh, okay. And so I got to do that. I remember the St. Paul Saints. We were at a St. Paul Saints game, and I was having a beer. It was Thirsty Thursday night. Me and my wife didn't have kids yet, so we're like, Thirsty Thursday, we're gonna have a good night. And I got a I was early phone call. I got a text or something, and I looked down, and they're like, hey man, we need a cover for Toy Story by tomorrow morning, and it needs to be drawn and colored, and it's already like 8:30. And I was like, baby, we gotta go. Or I gotta go. Yeah. And so I did that, and that kind of started like doing more property work, which was great.
So what does it actually mean when you said the book got picked up? When we're talking about horror, does that mean they're like, okay, we're going to pay you 10 grand for the rights to this. We'll sell it and get everything. Is it like, we'll distribute it, and for every issue that sells, we'll give you $2 and you split it between the two of you? Or like, how does it work?
So like if you draw Batman or Superman or Spider-Man or Captain America at Marvel, you get a page rate to draw that, and then you get residuals for the issues in the graphic novels collections that come out, but you don't get any rights to obviously any of the characters and stuff like that. When you do a smaller publisher, what they do is they give you like a smaller page rate than you would get at Marvel or DC per page to draw it, and then they will publish it for you. And then usually what happens is like, okay, let's say that book, like The Walking Dead, ends up becoming like a TV show or something like that. Well, then you guys have an agreed upon split of like the media rights and stuff like that. Most of the time it goes more to the creators and stuff like that. Some places can be kind of shady, and they like want 50-50 or more just because they published it. So there's a plethora of different publishers that are out there that deal with small publishing and stuff like that. And you got to be kind of weary of how that works, because there's some that are great and there's some that they just want that IP that they're going to try to flip and turn into something, and their contracts can be hard to read and stuff. So, but this one was nice. This one, and it was great. And, they gave us a page rate, and they got our book out there, which was, for us at the time, it was just getting our story out there, getting our first work out there, and trying to build ourselves as comic book creators.
So do you build into your contracts then that you get a percentage of things moving forward, or is your art just like sold? Because like I know I listened to a different podcast. You said you did artwork for like Mall of America rides like forever ago.
Yeah.
Do they then just get to use that artwork and put it on mugs and put it on this and reuse it for this a million times over and never pay you again?
That's where the great thing about having that wife that's on the business end of things is like, hey, you've got 3 years of usage rights for this design. And then after that, we can revisit it. You want to do it in perpetuity, we can do that. Otherwise, we can extend it for another 3 years. So there's always usage rights. In comic books, usually what it is the life cycle of the publishing. So like let's say we did, because obviously you know what a floppy comic book looks like, right? Yeah. So eventually they come out in that format, and let's say there's 5 issues. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 come out every month. And then they usually do a collected version, which is like commonly called a graphic novel. And those are like what Barnes and Nobles and bookstores want to sell. It's got the whole story all collected. Once that's out, usually what happens is then the publisher usually has like a usage rights of some sort for maybe like a year after that graphic novel comes out. And then once that's done, then you kind of have this ticking clock of like when the rights completely come back to the story and everything for the creators. And if I wanted to take that book and go to another publisher and republish it, or if I wanted to continue the stories somewhere else down the road, you can do that. So
sure. Is that why a lot of stories then just kind of end, do you think?
Sometimes. Also, I think it's it's just how many people are reading it, and it's like how much money the publisher or even the creators really want to put into their own work, keep doing stuff. Like it's stuff like Walking Dead is probably the most famous independent comic book of all time. Like that first 6 issues, I remember Robert Kirkman, the creator, was like, I'm not even sure if we're going to have a story after this. It just depends on how the single issues do, and then if the trade or the graphic novel version of it does really well, we can keep doing it. And thankfully by like issue 3 or 4, he kind of saw the sales were doing good, and so they kept it going. And then once that collected version came out, it just sold and kept building. So then they did another one, and then it just kept going. And then next thing you know, he's got an agent sells it as a TV show, becomes one of the biggest cable TV shows of all time, and it's just he's in another stratosphere now.
Sure. So, which is crazy because it came out on AMC, which was like not a big thing at the time. Like they didn't have any big flagship shows that were carrying the network at that time, and I feel like that must have completely changed the game for him. What does the process look like? I feel like people have this idea that, oh, you're hired to do this, so you must write the story and you must do this, and like literally everything start to finish, which is not the case, especially with like a bigger thing.
Yeah.
But what does the process look like? Do people give you like a drawing of these are panel 1 through 8, there'll be these shapes, these are the text, and like a rough drawing, and you got to do it?
Actually, not really at all like that. So an editor will reach out from like a publisher usually, and they're like, hey, I want to see if you're available, and if I am, I'll take on the project. they will have a written script ready from a writer. And then that script is where things get funny, because I've worked in two different ways. I've worked where a writer is like, he calls out every panel, gives a ton of detail of what's in there, the word balloons and stuff like that, and you go off of that. Or I've had a writer also just be like, all right, this is page 5, Ant-Man is in a bar and he's fighting a bunch of guys on a pool table. Make it cool. Just end where he shrinks down and goes in the corner pocket. So there's no real, like, I can make 10 panels, I can make 2 panels, I can make 3 panels. It's up to me. And then what I do from either one of those scripts is I'll do what's called thumbnails. And they're just, usually if you take like an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, there's about 8 little shrunk down comic book pages on it. I have a template, and I just do really small, almost, I call it stick figure theater. And I just do layouts, and I send those to my editor, who's probably got a decent art background, who can kind of decipher my crazy scribblings.
Sure.
And will just give me suggestions and stuff. And then from there, once those are approved, then I go into pencils and I just pencil it. And it's kind of loose. I'm really loose on my pencils, and I kind of show those. And then there's maybe more suggestions of, oh, maybe have this person's head turn, or make this punch more violent, whatever. And then once that's done, you go into inks, which is you finalize everything and stuff. And whether that's a traditional where you're actually inking the page, or if that's digital where I'm in like Photoshop and stuff and I'm using layers and doing all that stuff. That's usually how a comic book page gets done. So yeah, it really varies. It's totally different from a script standpoint, but yeah, that's usually how it goes.
Do you primarily do digital then at this point?
I do. Just because of the timing of everything like that, like scanning everything in, cleaning it up, getting it, it's a time suck. And so my thing is it's just, I can do things sometimes too. Like if you're doing a fight scene or something like that, and you like have a building in the background and you know it's going to be redone, you can like take that layer and put it backwards or put it in another panel. But what I usually like to do is if I'm doing a page or a story and I've got a page where it's like, oh, I'm Batman punching the Joker, like I got to do this traditional just because I want that original. And it's either A, to keep so I can like, hey, I drew Batman, one day, I can show my kids, my grandkids, whatever, or I can sell that page to the fan base and stuff. Sure. And so I always like to at least have a couple pages from every project that's hand drawn. I did that with the Captain America book that I just did. And I did it was a 140, 150 page book. And I think I did like 20, 25 originals in that just because like, I wanted to have a surplus. What's that?
Isn't that their IP?
Yeah.
Are you allowed to sell?
You are. That's the cool thing about like I can't go and put a Captain America t-shirt up on my web store and be like, I drew Captain America, you should buy this t-shirt.
Okay.
Because that infringes on them. But the original artwork that I made for their product is, I'm entitled to that, and I'm entitled to sell that.
But you're not allowed to make prints of it.
But I'm not allowed to make prints of it. You have to kind of go through Marvel and ask, or DC. And sometimes they're cool with that. Like, if they're like, hey, this is a really popular page or this popular image, they have a deal in place for doing that kind of stuff. So I think sometimes people just assume they're just, no, we want to own everything and stuff. And there's things could be better, but like, sure, they're very, very open about, like, I've got a friend of mine, he's a cover artist who just kills every one he does, and he tends to make prints of every one he does, and they're all licensed. They have the Marvel logo on it and stuff, and he sells them and stuff. And I don't know for sure, but I think Marvel may even send them to like fancy some of their people they work with, and they may do like really awesome limited edition runs of them and stuff. So
sure,
they're very much into making money, so they will work with artists and stuff like that and figure something out, which is cool. But
yeah, and I think a lot of artists, what I've learned is you have to have affordable art, otherwise it's hard to get people to support you unless it's like a commission from a big brand. But as far as like your fan base buying stuff, like most people don't have $1,000. It is what it is.
It is true. The comic book fan base is funny because you have the fan who just wants to read the stories. Then you have the fan who like becomes a fan of creators, and they love supporting creators. So it's like we are seeing more like branding coming out now with comic book creators than ever. Like it's really cool to see, and they have their own web store, and that's where guys or the artists will just start getting like officially licensed Marvel or DC prints on their web store, and they love supporting that. And they'll go to conventions and they'll buy their merch and stuff.
Yeah.
But then you've got others who they want to own that one of one original piece of art from that story that they loved. And it's like, this is the original. He drew it. There's no other one like it. And they'll pay $3,000-$4,000 for a piece of original art. And it's their favorite thing, probably going, above their bedroom.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like any collector's thing, right? It's the reason somebody collects a jersey that's game worn or something if they're a big sports fan. And I mean, in skateboarding is the same way. It's like the industry is relatively young still.
Yeah.
So this is like the first time where people with money have nostalgia and want to buy stuff. So the skateboard, like the vintage graphics and stuff, like if you can get like an original unopened Tony Hawk board or whatever from the 80s, those sell for a ton of money because you have all these people that have, adult money because they're doctors or whatever, and they're like, I really wish I had this for my office. You know what, I'm getting it, because why not? There's nothing stopping me. So you mentioned conventions, which I was going to ask about this later, but we might as well talk about it now. What does a convention actually look like for someone like you? Like, what is I know you go and you sell some of your merch and you do a signing or whatever, but does the convention contact you and say, hey, what's your rate to come out for 2 days? Your hotel will be this, and this is what we expect you to do? Or how does it actually look?
It's so in this day and age, a lot of artists have an art rep that will sell their original pages for them and ship them and package them, and they do a lot of stuff. And they'll even, like, if an artist just doesn't have time, because as my friend Ben says, is like, I think outside of farmers, he's like, I think comic book artists like have the most longest work day of anybody they know. And so it's just, sometimes you just don't have enough time to do all that. So that's where these art reps come in, and they will help you with your branding and then your sales and all the stuff you'd like to do that you just don't have time because you're on a deadline and stuff. And they'll have like a roster of artists, and then they'll either reach out, or conventions will reach out and say, hey, we'd like to get a couple artists from you to come to a show, and then they'll negotiate a deal, like an appearance fee or a per diem, flights, all that kind of stuff. And then they'll go, and then there's an expectation of maybe they'll do like a panel where they talk about their work, kind of like what we're doing now. They'll do a retrospective, or they'll type up their next big thing, and then they'll have a table and they'll sell their comic book art. They'll maybe take a limited run of sketches or commissions. I used to be able to do like 11 by 17, like cover style commissions at shows, but I'm so busy now that to make sure I do something that I'm really happy with and stuff, I kind of just do like these 9x12 headshots and stuff, and I'll color them, I'll try to do stuff, and I'll sell those, and I'll take a commission list, and sometimes that fills up before the show. Sometimes it's, I'll have time, to fill it up while I'm at the show. So if you come up to me and ask, I might be available and stuff. So you're drawing, you're talking to people, you're giving people experiences. You may be on a panel about, if you're on a X-Men book or something, there might be a other group of X-Men creators there, and you'll be talking about the X-Men for an hour. And so it's busy. It's super busy. And, and then hopefully at night you're going out meeting colleagues and hanging out that you haven't seen in a while, and do it all again the next 2 or 3 days.
A lot of illustrators, I gotta assume, supplement their income in that kind of way, just depending on how much work they have going on at the time. Like 100%. If they're in between jobs, they're like, well, I can just sign up for these ones, and that'll kind of help pay my bills for now. But then other times when they got a lot of projects in the works, they're just like not to be found.
Sometimes it's not just supplement your income; it is your income. Like, so I mean, there's more amazing artists out there than there are actual jobs to do. And then you get some people, and they've kind of sung their song at Marvel or DC and stuff like that, but like they're still super talented, and they have a fan base, and maybe they're getting older, and they're just, I don't know, they're not as in demand, but they can go to a comic convention and they can take a commission list. And I mean, it is not unheard of to make $10,000 more at a convention for a certain type of artist and stuff like that, and just crush it. And then they're like, well, why don't I just do this every weekend? And so they go and they live that road life, and they'll be in Pittsburgh one weekend, they'll be in San Jose the next, and they just keep going.
Yeah.
It works.
Well, and those people primarily get known for one specific thing that like they were, did this one thing that everyone really loves them for.
Yeah.
Is there one thing that everyone really loves you for specifically?
It's funny because I kind of, not just with comic books, but in my work in general, I kind of jump around. But with comic books, while I haven't really drawn him a ton, I love drawing the Hulk, and I draw the Hulk a lot. If I'm if I'm on a phone call for something and it's kind of boring, I'll just whip out a Hulk sketch and then I'll put it up there. And so the Hulk is kind of well known. I used to draw Dick Tracy a lot because I grew up like, I went to see the movie as a kid and it just blew me away. And I realized that I'm like, my dad was like, well, the comic strip is in the newspaper like every day. And I was like, oh. And so then it got me into comic strips. And so I just always thought the character was really cool. And so I would draw him. And it's kind of what it worked because like people know who that character is, but they don't, it's not like he's the most popular character right now. So like, you could draw Spider-Man or Batman and Deadpool and all these characters, but like you throw out a Dick Tracy sketch and everybody's like, whoa, that's a little different. Yeah. So it kind of made me stand out a little bit. So there's certain characters. And then I got to actually work on the comic book in the last year, which they just relaunched, which was cool. So yeah. And then Captain America, I just did this big graphic novel called The Ghost Army 2 years ago. And I loved drawing Captain America. And so I think that's probably the character I'm most well known for.
When you do something like that, do you do literally every panel for the entire book?
Yeah. I did bump into some scheduling issues. So I had a couple of people come in and help just because it was a tight deadline, it happens here and there. But out of like the 150 pages, I drew like 95% of that thing.
So let me ask you this. Why do people like Marvel or anybody... Why do they hire a separate artist for the cover?
Sometimes sometimes people are just known as cover artists, and it's like they know the fan base that they'll bring over, and just like, sometimes some artists just aren't great at doing eye-catchy covers, which is weird. Like you can do really good storytelling inside, but for whatever reason, maybe you're just not the most dynamic of all of them. Sometimes you don't even get an explanation. And also too, I think, when you're on such a tight deadline, adding that extra image, which is the most important image, you may take 2, 3, 4 days to do that cover. You may not have 2, 3, 4 days to break up the process of the schedule of the inside art that needs to get done. And so I've always been frustrated when I haven't gotten to do my own covers, and they do also variant covers because each book will now have like 2 or 3 different covers, and there's certain, like this has a small run, this is the main cover that It's kind of like gig posters at concerts where there's the regular one and then they'll do like a foil holographic version. They're just collectability and stuff.
Yeah, but I would just think that like the art wouldn't necessarily match. I know the thing with comic books is like it's a character's IP, like you said, that already exists, so you only have so much freedom really for like what to do with the character to begin with. But still, like it's a visual thing of what a comic book is. So to me, it seems odd to have a different artist when you flip.
Yeah, and
you know what I mean?
And a lot of times anymore, the artist will do a cover, but it may not be the main cover. Like I just did a cover for Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man, and it had Deadpool on it. And it was for this theme that they did for Marvel for April called April Pools Day. And so all of Marvel's April books had a Deadpool cover where he invaded the book, and it was, but he wasn't in, when you read the story inside, he wasn't in the book, but it was just a theme of covers. And so then it was just a collectability thing of like, I want to get all the Deadpool covers for that month and stuff. And so, it's funny because like I showed it to somebody and they're like, oh, you drew this Deadpool cover. That's cool. And then they like flip through and they're like, where's Daredevil or where's Deadpool? And I'm like, he's not in it. It's just, it's a very nerd heavy thing that sometimes can be tricky to explain. And I get it. I wish more interior artists would do it, because a lot of times too, that artist who does the cover doesn't even know what the book is about. Like it's like you just get hey, we need the Hulk smashing through a building or something like that, and it's like, okay, and it's cool. It's a cool image, but like to me, storytelling is the most important part of the whole thing. And so I feel like we've lost a little bit of storytelling in covers, which then makes it like when you're just looking at this wall of cool images, it becomes like it's cool, but like what draws you in? Storytelling. And if there's not a lot of storytelling, then you might just look at it and be like, I don't know, nothing's really grabbing me, where if we had something that was, factored into the actual story, it may be like, oh, what's going on? I go back to that first issue I ever got where Hulk is smacking Spider-Man off a building. I'm like, why are they fighting? What are they doing? I want to know.
Yeah.
And like, it just doesn't happen as much anymore. I don't know, it's above my pay grade a little bit. So
Sure. Well, talking about pay grades, so you eventually did graduate from the Pixar Toy Story thing, and you've done a lot of things, and we'll touch the other ones too. But you got hired by Marvel first, correct, and then DC shortly afterwards.
Actually, it was DC first. I did I got Superman story, which was cool. It was a 10-page Superman story that took place in like the 40s. And the first page I drew started with Dracula's castle, and Batman and Superman were punching a bunch of army of Frankensteins while Dracula looked on. And I was like, it's all downhill from here. Like, that's like, if you would ask 10-year-old Brent what he would want to draw in a comic book, it would have been that. And then I was like, well, this is amazing. And and it's funny because I had been hustling hard, going to conventions, trying to show my portfolio to convince people. And they were like, we think you're close. You're just going to need to get it like a gig. And I think once you get a gig, it'll take off. But these are DC and Marvel editors telling me this. And I'm like, well, if I'm a gig away, like, why don't you just give me that gig? And I don't know what it was. I just happened to find the right editor who I think I'd send some stuff to through email. And it was, I kind of had gotten known for like a retro style, like kind of a throwback style. And he was like, I just think you'd be perfect because this takes place in the 40s and you kind of have that old school style. And I was like, awesome. And so I swear, once I did that, like almost like right away, I got a Marvel opportunity, which was awesome. And then I kind of bounced around both for a little bit. And then I ended up getting Ant-Man. I got, like, right as the movie was coming out, I got an Ant-Man project that was like, I always laugh because I was like, if you had like 5-6 years before the Ant-Man movie got an Ant-Man gig, you'd be like, who did I make mad at Marvel to make me draw Ant-Man? And then all of a sudden to get it when he's going to be the coolest, most popular he had ever been.
Yeah, being attached to Paul Rudd. I mean, like, you can't, it's not going to fail because it's Paul Rudd. I feel like you need to meet Paul Rudd for photos to like hold the poster.
We were this close. He was going to do he was supposed to speak in St. Paul like 6-7 years ago at some event, and it was about superhero comics and stuff, and they were going to have this comic book panel beforehand. And so there was like, you'll probably get to meet, and he like 3 weeks before canceled it because of a filming obligation. So it was so close, but he doesn't do a lot of conventions. I think he's doing pretty well. So I don't think he has to. But.
I think he's doing more than well. So if you had to choose DC or Marvel,
well, I was a Marvel kid growing up big time. I would read anything Marvel. DC, I love Batman, I love Superman. There's like these odd little characters. I like the Flash a lot. Flash was, for a while there, was my favorite character overall when he had a TV show in the 90s.
Sure.
I loved it. It was a hokey show. But yeah, Spider-Man and Hulk were always my favorites for like long term, their runs. And I remember I had every issue for like years and years and years. And
if you had to rank top 3 favorite superheroes across any of them, what order?
It'd be Hulk, Dick Tracy, even though he's not a superhero. Those are my 2. And then Spider-Man, probably edging out Batman by a little bit.
Which one's the best version of the Hulk of all the like movies and stuff that have came out? Which one is the best?
It sounds funny, but I really liked his standalone movie that first got into the Marvel universe. Who was the actor?
2010-ish or
2010-ish.
Something? It was back time. Yeah, I've seen it.
And it was like the one that led right into like at the tail end of it. It was like the Avengers.
And people didn't think it was good, right? Like it generally speaking didn't perform well.
Yeah, but I liked it. I thought it had like little nods. Like I can't claim it's a great movie, but like I enjoy it. And I mean, because like I remember the Eric Bana movie, the Ang Lee Hulk that was like 3 hours long. We and my wife had first started dating, and it was like I took her to that movie, and I remember like 20 minutes in, I was a huge Hulk fan. That's finally my favorite characters up on the screen. I'd look at my wife and be like, "I'm so sorry, like this is a really bad movie." And and so yeah, that was a little redemption. I think him being in all the Avengers movies has been really fun. So, but like. I wish we had more single Hulk movies.
So did finances just like totally game changer once you started working with Marvel and DC, where you're like, I'm just like golden now?
I don't know if it was golden. I never have gone on like a long run on a book. I've done like 5, 6, 8 issues or something like that. And then that'll end, and then I'll have like a little down period, and then I'll find something else to do. That's how you really accumulate a really nice, because like amount of money and stuff is like really long runs. Art fans know you as that on that book. You probably have original art, and then your residuals from just being on that book for a while just kick in, because they'll collect them, they'll make them into a hardcover, and then you can order them on Amazon, or you can get them here and stuff. But I definitely was doing good. Like, it was nice. I was really happy, and like, it was like that childhood dream coming true thing too. And I was working harder than ever, but I didn't care, because like I was just doing what I wanted to.
Were you then still picking up all these other things? Because nowadays, like, you just released like an AC/DC poster, which how epic is that? But that's not even the only epic one. Like, if you go back, you've done them for a bunch of people. Like you said, Post Malone recently.
Yeah, it was a big week last week with Post and AC/DC. It was kind of crazy.
Yeah, dude. So did those types of things pop up just because you were like in between book series and you're like looking for work?
I think so, just because I'd always freelance is just scary of never really feeling comfortable. You kind of get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But like, this is, I mean, 08, 09, I'm like 5-6 years out of college. I'm like, bought a first house, got married, gonna probably have kids down the road. So like, you're always thinking about that stuff. And like, it's like, and then something would come your way. And like, as great as comic books are and are fun, like you get an opportunity to do Count Chocula, Frankenberry and Booberry cereal box art, and then you realize that stuff pays. Like, what you could make in a weekend doing that stuff is what you would make over 4 or 5 weeks doing a comic book.
Sure.
And you're like, oh, well, I can't say no to that. And so and then you're like, I love those cereal box monsters, and so you just do them, and you just I mean, I was chained to that desk like in my late 20s into my mid 30s for sure.
How come you didn't, as those jobs came up, what kept you then wanting to still make comics and stuff? Because like, this was you getting those jobs with GM was General Mills was way before your Devil's Highway, like your own series.
Just because comics were always the first love, and then you can buy that cereal box art, but you don't know who's drawing it. You just buy it for the character, and they don't want you to know who's drawing it. Especially back then when like Facebook and social media wasn't what it was. And it was funny because like I remember getting Facebook pages and loading up all my art on my own art page and posting things that I had drawn, like Honey Nut Cheerios cereal box art, and people were like, whoa. He's like, my daughter had that, and she like, it had some 3D glass thing or something, and she loved it. And like Go-Gurt trading cards and stuff that I was doing. And but you just didn't really have a way to really kind of talk about that stuff. And so, and I don't think they don't want you to talk about it, but it's just like, you just like, do people really care? And then all of a sudden you do find people care, which is kind of cool. But like, they're not posting your name on it at all.
Sure. Which is the funny part when you're in an industry like yours, where you go to a convention and there's people like lining up to get your autograph and take pictures. If you go to Cub Food, no one knows who you are.
Right. Well, it's like funny because like after I started posting stuff and getting more social media, I have people, it's not uncommon if I'm at a comic convention, they'll come with flat boxes of that cereal box. And they're like, can you sign these? And I'm like, sure. So it's kind of cool. So,
but you don't have all of that as an archive, like on your website, right?
Yeah. I mean,
so how do people even know that you did?
I post it every now and then and stuff. And I did a relaunch of my website like 3 years ago. And before that, I had more of the corporate work on there. And I think more for me, it was more like a shift of like going back to like why you asked why I still was doing comics, is because I freaking love it. It's the best thing to like, it makes me feel like I have to do them, even if financially sometimes it's like I could be making more money doing something else. It's just like, I got to do it. And so, and then there's that. It's just like, people stop you and tell you and stuff. Like I just had a comic convention thing at Surly Brewing last Sunday, and I had a guy come up to me with a book that I'd done like 7 or 8 years ago, and he was a younger guy, but he's like, dude, this was like one of my first comic books I ever got. Like when Marvel started doing the movies now, I got into it and stuff, and I like got this book, and I was like, oh, that's so cool. It's kind of made me feel a little old, but it made me feel really cool that like I was somebody's first comic book and stuff.
So why did you make is the Devil's Highway thing totally done?
It is for now. We've never like said it's over. So Devil's Highway is this creator-owned book that I did with Minnesota writer Benjamin Percy. And Ben is a great writer. He works for Marvel a lot. He still is. He writes Wolverine, Deadpool, Wolverine. He does a ton of stuff with the X-Men. Punisher, he just announced he's doing the Punisher now. But him and I just got to know each other at conventions, and we just got talking about stuff that we like, and we both were big true crime fans and stuff, and we were talking about certain documentaries and stuff that we watched, and we just started racking our brain of like, what can we work on together? And there's more of now, but like 4 or 5 years ago, there wasn't a lot of like crime comics. Okay. And so we're like, hey, it'd be kind of fun to fill this niche that, like, I think with crime podcasts and stuff being so huge, I think there's going to be like a interest in it. And so he concocted the story, and I thought it was really fun. It's Midwest based, and it's pretty cool, and it's dark, and it was different than kind of the light fare that I was doing at Marvel, which I liked, but I kind of wanted to try something different. And so we pitched it to one of the many publishers and stuff like that. And, they picked it up, and it was great. And we did 2 runs. We did 2 4-issue miniseries of the book, and we sold the media rights to it. And we just got a little bit ago. It's for a TV show. We got to read the pilot, which was crazy.
They're going to make a TV show.
It's it's got a long bunch of hurdles to do, but we read the pilot for it. And so right now, Ben got super busy with a lot of Marvel work. I got kind of busy with this Captain America graphic novel that I was doing. And we've talked about circling back to it. And we're kind of like, okay, so if cameras get rolling on this thing and it's going to be legit, like, we've got a third story to tell, but we're just kind of like waiting for timing on it. And so that's kind of where we're at with that.
Do you think stories run their course and should be shut down? Because if you look at like Star Wars, there was like an actual story arc that was okay, we're done. I think we're done with like Dragon Ball Z. The first 3 seasons when Goku defeats Frieza, like that, the series supposed to be done there. It was clearly written to there. Everything after that is fine, but none of it actually logically makes sense after that, because the story was written for this. Versus comic books will just literally go forever.
Yeah. At some point, it goes from being a story to being an IP, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that's the great thing about comic books is that, like, and I think I was talking about, earlier about this artist who's still good and still great, but like he had maybe sung his song on a character or just in general in certain superhero books, and he moves on. But then this younger generation comes up and they have something different to say with it. And so the characters are always kind of fluid and different. And, the Peter Parker in 2025 isn't the Peter Parker that my dad read in 1962. Nor should he be.
Does it make what's canon just really difficult to understand?
100%. And that's where like the nerds get really frustrated. And it's like, how can you possibly make this guy, from who's been around for 50 years, still the same character and have all those stories matter and count? And you have to sort of cherry pick it, what's important, and they get certain people get frustrated. And then it's just like, but just enjoy the book. Just pick it up and enjoy it.
You've done a lot of things outside of comic books too. I know that you have a history with like horror monsters and monster movies and that type of thing. I know that you're big into wrestling at one point in time. I know you're a big Packers fan. So I want to kind of like touch on some of those. So starting with monsters, what are your favorite 3 monster movies?
Oh, that would have to be the original Dracula, the original Frankenstein, and the original Wolfman. Those are like the 3 best.
How does somebody make a movie that can be better than the original with those characters? Like, how is it possible?
Well, I actually think I think the best Dracula movie might be Bram Stoker's Dracula, the one that came out in the 90s. I just love the atmosphere and Bela Lugosi's performance in the original one. It's a slow movie, I can't deny that, but like going back to like, talk about Dick Tracy, I've always just been like, I don't know, an old soul maybe, and I just love the history of Hollywood that involves with those movies. Like Universal would have went bankrupt without those movies. And so the owner's like son comes in and he's just like, I like scary things. Let's do this. And he finds a cheap way to like, picks up the rights to these books. And he just gives these kind of like misfit people that were lingering around the studio an opportunity to make movies in their own voice. And you just get this amazing, series of movies and stuff, and they're pushing special effects and stuff like that. And I don't know, I just love going back and stuff and looking at that. I just watched the Wolfman movie that came out last year, I think it was.
Okay.
And it was horrible. And it was like they were trying to use practical effects, but like I don't know. It just didn't have any heart and soul to it, where like they were pushing something back then, and now I don't know if they were pushing anything. Sure. They were just trying to like keep that Wolfman license or something. I don't know. It fell flat to me, and I don't know. There's just going back and seeing the wonderment of what they were trying to create from the ground up back then is a soft spot for me.
If you got to take over and that the IP for any character was going to be yours from horror, you could then make a graphic novel series, which one would you pick?
Ooh, it'd be Michael Myers. I think so. Yeah. Because like, I don't know.
What would you do differently with his story?
I wouldn't even really. I tried to go back and like, I wouldn't tell his story. It would be like the story of people in Haddonfield. Like, I always think Haddonfield is like this really, like, if you think about it, this unique town of like, every year on Halloween, we got this killer who just comes to town. Him and Jason would be fun to do something with. And like, because I feel like all the sequels, they kind of make him the main character. And I'm like, no, you've got to make new Laurie Strodes. You got to make new characters that people fall in love with and want to root for. Like, my daughter's getting into horror movies now, and we've been watching stuff, and we just watched have you seen the Fear Street movies that are on Netflix? They're just like paint by numbers horror movies and stuff. And it's like, she's even picking up on that. She's like, I didn't even remember these characters' names. And like, but she loves the original Halloween, and she like remembers all those characters' names because they were so likable and stuff. And now they're just like, you know, here's the nerd, here's this. And it's like, they're just, like I said, it's paint by numbers and it's kind of forgettable. So.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I've been watching through the Alien movies, and that's exactly how it is. It's like, you have the one military tough guy. That's that character in this one. You have the one like quirky one. That's this one. You have the one that's going to be not really a love interest, but you're like, that you want that person to live, but you know they're not gonna.
Yeah.
Tell me more about these posters. So the one that's sitting on the table right now is just like a Green Bay for Cheesehead TV Packers one that you gave me, which I'm jazzed about. But like I mentioned before, I just saw the AC/DC one. I just saw the Post Malone one. How did you get into doing posters like that? You did Justin Timberlake one too.
I did. So a handful of years ago, Tom Petty was coming to town, and my wife was like, I really want to go to that show. We had sort of snoozed on when tickets went on sale. It sold out real quick. We were hanging out with my friend Adam, whose studio we're in today. And I was telling him like, I really want to go to that show. But I mean, like the secondary market is pretty brutal. And he goes, hey, you know what you should do is, I've got a friend over at the XL Energy Center. They sometimes gift posters to bands as a thank you for coming to that venue. And he's like, they like to get a local artist to do a poster. They do a limited run of them. And he's like, you might want to reach out to her and see if they're interested. And so I sent some samples of my work, but I didn't really have any concert posters. I just had comic book covers. And she was cool enough to say, yeah, we'd love to have you do something for Tom Petty. And so I kind of created a job for myself, and it came with some free tickets to the show, which was awesome because ended up being his last show through Minnesota, and that was huge. And then they just kind of kept me on their radar for doing that. And so I did stuff for Weezer and Pink, who came to town. I did Kiss. And then I started finding out, they're like, if you ever have bands that you would really like to do one for, let us know. And so Blink-182 came through, and I was like, I gotta do Blink-182. And it kind of worked out really well. You know, you get paid, you get some free tickets to shows. And then I just built up this portfolio of those kind of posters. And then Metallica was coming to town and for their Hardwired tour a couple years back. And so I sent it to their merch person that I found. And they were like, yeah, you look good. You can do it. And I was like, oh, what? And it was just like all in the same morning. I found out they were coming to Minneapolis. I hunted down their merch person online, and I sent him the samples, and he wrote back right to me. He was like, yeah, cool. And I was like, oh my God. Wow. And so that was like the first one that was like all at the merch stands. And then, you know, they were on the jumbo screens and stuff. And that was it for me. They were my band. I loved them. Outside of the Beastie Boys, they would have been the band I wanted. And
so is that your all-time favorite as far as all the posters that you made?
No, I actually don't like that poster.
Okay, so what are you, if you had to pick three of them so I could show them on the screen, what are your favorite three that you've
done? You know, this Post Malone one was pretty fun to do.
Magic the Gathering
card? Magic the Gathering card. I would have to say the Foo Fighters one from Target Field last year. And then actually, there's a really cool one I did for Kiss when they came to for their End of the Road tour that looks like an old Kiss comic from the 70s that I always liked how that one turned out. And I got to give you one more. The Blink 182 May the 4th. That was when Tom rejoined the band, kicked off their reunion tour here in town. I did a Star Wars theme poster for that one.
Hell yeah. And I know you're a big Star Wars fan. You've done a lot of Star Wars stuff too.
I've done a few Star Wars things. It's been kind of fun, which it's funny. Like I'm not like the biggest Star Wars fan, but I had this, I mean, everybody loves Star Wars to some degree. We had a VHS tape that my dad recorded all 3 movies on HBO.
So did I.
Yeah, I think everybody did that.
Yeah.
And I just found that in my parents' basement, which was really cool. So I kept it. And so, yeah, I mean, Star Wars it's Americana. It's in your heart in some way. And so you don't have to be a huge, like, diehard, know every,
well, you go to conventions,
pilot.
so you see the diehard.
Yeah,
so in comparison to those nerds,
for sure.
Which not talking smack about it, but it is just funny how like in the nerddom,
they're another
different
level.
ones, people like have to be the biggest nerd in comparison to the other people, and I'm like kind of funny about that way with like Harry Potter and stuff. Which is so
my
silly.
wife too. Yeah,
really.
Yeah.
I was the perfect age. Like the first book came out when I was just old enough to like read.
Yeah,
and so by the time the last book came out, I was like maybe 19 or 20. So I was like pretty close to the age of the characters growing up, so like I could relate to it a lot more. I think anybody else who wasn't part of that generation can't really understand why like my generation is so attached
for
to
sure.
it. You know what I mean?
We went to Universal in Orlando, and I went to Harry Potter World with her, and I think Harry Potter's cool. I don't get into it and stuff, but to watch her nerd out about everything, which she's watched me nerd out about bands and comics and movies. She just doesn't have a lot of things she's like that with, and to watch her nerd out I loved watching her experience all of it. It was it was amazing. The place was amazing.
Of all the people that you've met, because guaranteed you've gotten to meet through conventions, through these, shows and whatever. I'm sure you've gotten to meet a lot of rock stars. I'm sure you've met the creators of huge comics. I'm sure you've met the actors in some of the movies, whatever.
Yeah.
So far, who has been like your favorite? Maybe they aren't a celebrity, maybe they are, but who's been your favorite one that it stands out that personally it was such a cool person to meet?
Okay, so I'm an 80s kid, and there was an 80s movie called The Monster Squad.
Okay.
And so you gotta check it out if you haven't seen it. It's a very cool, like, it's all the Universal monsters kind of meeting together. And that cast of that movie was at a convention in Louisville, Kentucky. And they were just hanging out. And it's a very niche fan base for that, of more than anything. Like, some people like probably don't even know what that movie is. Yeah. But if you do know what that movie is, you love that movie. And I spent a whole night at a bar with them, and just them telling me stories about the being on the set and the characters and stuff like that. That was super cool. We had talked about The Flash earlier, and there was a TV show in the 90s. The guy who played The Flash, his name is John Wesley Shipp. He ended up being the dad in Dawson's Creek.
Oh, cool.
He is one of the nicest dudes you will ever meet. I've done many, many shows with him, and he is just... He'll be in the catering back area, and like he'll just, hey, how's it going? He'll catch up with you and stuff like that. There's so many. It's funny. Gene Simmons, actually, I met him at Comic-Con before I even was doing comics. I went to a convention just to try to find work, and I saw him walking around, and I got a picture with him, and he was super cool, which he doesn't always have the reputation for being the nicest guy, but I thought he was super cool.
Yeah.
And Bill Goldberg, the pro wrestler, I'd have to give him, he was super cool. We were up in Winnipeg at a convention, and we just got talking. He had a young son, and I had a young daughter, and we were about the same age, and we both got talking about all the shows that they love watching.
Oh, sure.
And so I talked with Bill Goldberg about being a parent for like a half hour over breakfast one morning, and he was super cool. And Carl Weathers, I got to give Carl Weathers, I saw him at a show, had breakfast next to him, and we just made small talk over breakfast, and he was the coolest.
Man, I've had nothing but good luck meeting people that I was like excited about meeting. I mean, I understand if you catch somebody at a bad time.
Yeah.
And usually I feel like you could tell if somebody wants to be talked to. Like I hung out with
Chevy Chase outside of the bathroom doesn't want to talk to you. I know that for a fact.
Yeah, well, like so I interviewed Bryson Roche, who's the younger brother of Jacoby Shaddix, the singer of Papa Roach. And so when they came through Milwaukee, he invited me to like come kick it with the band and stuff, and like saw the show, and then hung out with them afterwards. Jacoby's so nice. Like I have a video of me and him dancing to a Prince song in the back. Like, but I could tell like when he's responding to something on his phone, like don't talk to him right now.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
doing something. He's clearly busy. Now's not the time. I've been in the green room before a lot of shows because a lot of times that's when I interview a music artist.
Yeah.
And right before, that 15 minutes or whatever before they're going on stage, they're putting in their things. They're going.
Yeah.
Don't ask them. That's not when I'm going to ask them for a picture.
Yeah,
I'm going to wait
for sure.
until after. Okay, I got a bunch of like top 3 questions for you.
Let's do it.
So I want to hammer out some of these quick.
All right.
So you mentioned wrestling. Top 3 wrestlers of all time.
Oh, man. All right. So I'm going to go with a few that probably aren't what people would think is top 3. But there was a guy named Greg the Hammer Valentine when I was a kid. He just looked like everybody's dad who I grew up with. And Arn Anderson is another one that I loved. And then the last one, I got to go with Bret Hart. So
what's your all-time favorite wrestling memory?
All-time favorite wrestling memory is my high school football coach got us tickets to Valparaiso University because that's where he went to school, and he worked security for events on weekends. And he got us pro wrestling tickets for WWF when we were younger, and we were 3rd row.
Whoa.
And Lex Luger was coming down to the ring, and we were right out along the side of the gate or whatever. And Lex Luger is just coming down, and I go to give Lex a pat on his shoulder, and it is nothing but baby oil. And for like the next 45 minutes, I am like, it's like popcorn butter, and I cannot get the baby oil off my hand. He was smothered in it.
Dude, that's incredible. Okay, so do you still enjoy your beers? Because these days I can't have more than like 2, and I'm like, ugh.
Oh, I had a lot this weekend, so yeah, I can still throw it out.
You've done a lot of beer labels. What are your favorite 3 beer labels that you've ever done? And you got to send me pictures because I want to be able to see them.
So there was this company in St. Paul who is no longer around, unfortunately, called Stack Deck Brewing. And over the course of like 2.5 years, I did like 50 some beer labels for them. They were doing a lot of small runs. We did 2 beers that were based off the Sabotage video for the Beastie Boys. And that was sort of the thing. Like, I don't really encourage it, but like their approach was like, okay, we're going to kind of mess with some IPs. But the thing is that these beers are in such small runs that by the time
a cease and desist
comes by, it won't matter because we're not going to we'll probably do it again. So we did these really 2 awesome beers based off of the Sabotage video. We did one, I can't even remember the name of it because it was so weird, but it had this cool, there's an artist named Jack Kirby who's like one of my big idols, and I think it was called Another Dimension. No, that was the Beast. We did a follow-up Beastie Boys one about the Intergalactic video. So that was going to be on there. Sorry, there's so many beer labels. And I would also say there's still in play right now, but Fulton Brewing in town has a line called Hop Kingdom. And it's a line of hoppy beers. And all of them are animals from Minnesota that are kind of drawn with hops as like their skin coat of some sort. And I'm really happy with how those turned out. They're really singular images that work well as an icon on a beer label or a shirt, merch, and stuff like that. And so they continue to keep pumping those out and stuff. And I've done enough of them now where like I think they're good for like a couple of years now. So I have no idea when they're going to come out. But you can go to liquor stores here and get Hop Kingdom variety packs and stuff like that. So I'm really happy with that. And then the one that got it started for me was Darkness Surly Brewing. That's like their big fall beer. It's a stout, and it's every year they pick an artist to do a different monster on that cool. beer. And so I did a werewolf, which was super awesome. And that was in 2012, which is crazy insane how long ago it was. But really loved how that turned out on a bottle and shirts and everything. And so I know I probably did more than 3. But sure. I apologize. And I know but you got me talking about beer, and I'm just going to ramble forever.
Okay, well then along that lines of beer, you obviously like craft beer.
Yeah.
What are your favorite 3 individual craft beers?
Favorite individual craft beers? I always like a good Surly Furious. It's kind of like the icon here, but like I just love it. It's great. The second one is this really good Pilsner by a back channel brewing out here kind of off Lake Minnetonka. It's just the easiest drinking. I don't know. It's like finish mowing your lawn kind of beer. It's the best.
What's the name of it?
Well, the brewery is called Back Channel, and it's just their Pilsner. They don't have a name.
Okay.
Every year at the state fair, when we know it's kind of like the end of summer, me and my father-in-law always get a Summit Oktoberfest. And Oktoberfests are my favorite beers. And we always it's the end of summer, beginning of fall. And so then we always always toast the end of summer with an Oktoberfest.
Yeah, Wisconsin. Well, I guess we're not in Wisconsin. You're not even from Wisconsin. You skipped it entirely. You're just
did.
Screw this area. But
almost all my family is from Wisconsin, so I have Wisconsin love. All my sports teams are Wisconsin.
I was going to say
so.
You're a big Packers fan, obviously, because of this. Who are your favorite 3 Packers players of all time?
William Henderson, fullback, was my favorite
with the huge padding.
Yes.
Yeah.
I always think about guys like him, and I think about he was a lunch pail guy, man. He just brought it. He just brought it to every day. Me and my oldest buddy, we have a soft spot for Don Mikowski. He was great. And
he was a little bit before my time.
Yeah, but and then I love Rashawn Gary. He's one of my favorites. Like, he's not one of the best players, but I just love his vibe and stuff. And he's my favorite current player. So.
I love watching the commercials and stuff that he's been doing for Quick Trip.
Yes,
they're legendary because he clearly doesn't really know how to act it, but that also makes it funnier. Yeah. You know what I mean? His 100%. A little bit of awkwardness just adds to it. What's your favorite Packers memory?
Favorite Packers memory, I will have to say, is my entire family went to Green Bay to see the season opener in the 2010 season, year that we won the Super Bowl.
Against the Bills.
I
was there.
Oh, nice. That was a great game. They just demolished them the whole game.
That's the only game I've ever seen.
That's the only game you've ever seen?
The only game I've ever gone to was that specific game.
We went to, a couple things about that game that were amazing. So we did the Fuzzy Thurston's tailgate thing, which is no longer a thing. But Jerry Kramer came over and showed off his Super Bowl ring, and he had this sweet brown leather jacket. My mom getting to try on a Super Bowl ring was one of my favorite memories. And then me and my mom were in the pro shop on that Saturday before the game, and Bart Starr walked through, and he cut through, and I just saw him, and I was like, "You're Bart Starr?" And he goes, "I am." And he was so cool. He took a picture with my mom, and so that was great. My wife was there. She was pregnant with our first daughter. My brother, my dad, my mom, and it's just an awesome day. Awesome time.
That's incredible. Yeah. I got to interview Dominic Daphne a few years ago.
Really? Nice.
Yeah, when he was still on the team, and I'm supposed to interview Carl Brooks coming up here soon.
Oh,
He's
nice.
Messaged me back. I don't know what day we're going to do it, but when I did it, I went out to the pro shop, and they didn't have any Dominic Daphne jerseys printed. Yeah. But anyone who was active roster, they would make one for you.
Yeah.
So I went there early, had them make me one, and then went to the apartment building that all the players live at.
Oh,
all the ones that
they all kind of
around
close. Yeah.
Yeah. There's I think there's a couple of them, but the one that I interviewed him at was in their common area. No. But he told me half the team lives in that building.
That's amazing.
And the building's basically dedicated to people who are part of the organization. And I was like, I wonder who's above. It was so sick.
That's so cool.
Yeah, just being such a big Packers fan, it was this is my job.
Yeah.
This is incredible.
Yeah. I got to do artwork for AJ Dillon. He did a radio or a YouTube show.
He still does a podcast, I think.
Okay, so he did a thing with Cheesehead TV, who I work with, and they had him on once a week on their YouTube channel. Yeah. And so they were like, "Can we get an AJ Dillon thing?" And he's a big nerd too.
Is he?
So I drew him kind of like Captain America. He had a shield, and I forget the name of it was Captain Quad or
Quadzilla?
something. Yeah. So we did some artwork for him and stuff, and I was bummed to see him leave. We were pretty stacked right now at running back, so it was kind of not surprising, but he was a good one, man, and I love how he's embraced Wisconsin. So.
Yeah, I love when people get into the community like that. Okay, so going back to superheroes, super villains. Who are your favorite 3 supervillains?
Supervillains? Okay, I loved, as a kid, I always thought Dr. Octopus was fun. Yeah. Mainly just to draw. He was just those tentacles and stuff like that. And he always had this super angry face. I don't know, there was something about it. I just always loved it.
A lot of line work.
A lot of line work, a lot of work. And I love Dr. Doom. I'm very excited about what they're going to do with him in the movies. He's kind of the ultimate bad guy to me.
Yeah. And MF Doom is my favorite rapper. And I feel because of MF Doom's effect on pop culture has only made Doom way bigger.
Even more. Yeah, for sure. And then my last one, oh man, Batman has such a great rogues gallery. I got to go with the Riddler. I think he's pretty sweet. He's fun to draw. So
over the Joker.
Yeah, I mean the Joker's super cool, but he's always I kind of like the secondary tier characters and the villains and stuff. There's some really goofy villains and stuff like that. That Spider-Man and Batman, they have a really good rogues gallery, but like it gets weird quick. Like,
sure. Yes, I imagine in all the expanded universe it gets even crazier. Which one of all of the characters that you've had to draw, what's been the hardest?
Hardest one is Spider-Man. Those webbings are brutal. Like,
like little netting kind of or whatever all over them.
You know, and it's funny because you'll watch people you idolize and stuff, and they've just got it down to a science and stuff. I think it's repetition, and I just haven't drawn him enough yet that like when I get to it, I'm like, you know, and I get how the form flows and stuff like that, but it always sort of trips me up a little bit. I got to spend a little more time on that. Probably a lot of other people do that have been drawing comic books as long as I have.
What's the character that you want to do a series for super, super bad from DC or Marvel?
Yeah. I would love another crack at Superman. I love drawing Superman. I only did like a 10-page story for him, and I would love to do more. I think this new movie that they have coming out is really going to capture the vibe that like when people think of Superman or what you want people to think of as Superman, like a little hope, a little bright positivity. You know, I didn't hate on the Zack Snyder movies because I like Zack Snyder for the most part, but I was like, I don't know if this is the Superman I want right now.
Sure.
And I thought Henry Cavill was an awesome Superman overall. I just would have loved to have seen him in something that was a little more, I don't know, that made me feel like a Superman movie should be, like the Christopher Reeve ones when I was growing up.
Yeah, I mean, that'll be the first superhero movie I see in theaters in, I don't even know, a decade plus will be Superman. So when you are doing all these drawings, you're drawing characters that already exist. How do you then develop your own style? Because you are copying other people's work, and it has to stay true to that to a certain degree.
Yeah, I mean, the great thing though is that Marvel and DC and they never tell you to stay on model. Like, I mean, you're getting those jobs because of the work that you've shown them, and they want you to draw like you because you doing your version is going to be the best thing for your character, or for you and for them, because it creates a new look. Like when I was a kid, there was a guy named Todd McFarlane who drew Spider-Man, and he came on there and he drew in a way that no one had ever drawn that character before. Like you had kind of seen like the traditional poses of Spider-Man, but this is the first guy who like drew Spider-Man where like his legs were going above his head, and he was just, you know, it was very dynamic and in your face. And that benefited Marvel, and that benefited Todd by doing that, by creating this whole new, I guess, language for the character.
Yeah.
And so I think Marvel and DC are always looking for people to do that kind to their characters. That said, there is a bit of we got to make sure people know, and it's like something, you know, it's like a weird line that it's magic when it hits, when it's somebody's completely hot new take on it. But obviously it feels like it's been around forever. And
so what's different about yours? Like what would be the identifiable, your fans would be like, I could tell that Brent did it.
I think it's mostly because it probably has nods to like if you go back and look at like a Captain America comic from like the 1940s, it doesn't look anything like what they draw them at today. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's just the way like now okay, here's a good example. Like in the 40s, men wore their belts like higher above their waist, right? Yeah. But now they're a little lower and stuff. Like I kind of think about that kind of stuff when I'm drawing. Sure. And so like I may not draw exactly like someone from the 1940s, but I try to pay attention to like either like their clothing style or fashion at the time. And I pay attention to that kind of stuff. The same with like Superman. When I draw Superman, like there's so many different versions of his S symbol. And I like to go back to like the 40s style where it's like a lot of guys like to draw it where it's like his whole chest is his giant S.
Yeah.
And like the originals, it was almost like the size of a softball or something. It wasn't that big. And so I try to like do things like that it's like, oh man, nobody's drawing him like that. So I try to take things like that. Hulk is the character I love to draw. A lot of people have humanized his face features. It's almost like Mark Ruffalo, like when they did like you can see it's Mark Ruffalo in that CGI a little bit. Obviously he's a monster.
Yeah.
But like in the old comic books, he had this face that like you couldn't tell it was Bruce Banner. It just the forehead like protruded out, like the nose shrunk, like it just he looked for like something from hell, you know? And like, I try to think about that when I draw him now. It's like, you don't want like a pretty Hulk. He should be sweaty, hairy, nasty, gross. And I don't know, looks like he ate like 50 hoagie sandwiches and just like is at the meat sweats, and I don't know. So like I kind of think about those things, which I don't think a lot of like the traditional artists today think about.
Sure.
So I don't know. It's small things, you know. It's try to stand out in that way.
What was the last thing that you drew that you didn't have a reference for?
Oh gosh. I try to limit the amount of reference when I go in, because I try to like, you know, it's all of a sudden it feels like you're kind of just like doing whatever.
Sure.
Post Malone in the Jelly Roll poster I did last week, there was a whole bunch of stuff that I needed reference for to make it look like a Magic the Gathering card.
Yeah.
So I got all of that, and I got all the text because I don't play Magic the Gathering. So
sure.
I was basically thankfully I had a really awesome guy named Graham at Live Nation who helped me with that. And he knew Magic the Gathering and stuff. But then when it came down to their outfits and stuff, and it was just like, we're kind of making them like Viking warlord characters. Yeah. I'm like, okay, I don't need any help with that.
Sure.
Like, I know what this is going to like. So once it came, I got their faces and I was happy with that. But then when it came to the costumes they were going to actually wear on the trading card, I guess that was me. I was like, and so little things like that. I'm like, okay, I know how to do that.
Have you ever tried to illustrate concept art for things that don't have illustrations? Such as like, there's so many monsters in Star Wars or in Harry Potter or in whatever that have never been illustrated. You only ever see them described via text.
Okay.
But would be really cool, theoretically, if somebody illustrated them. So as an example, I don't know if you saw Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them.
Yeah, we watched those. Yeah.
Okay, so the Niffler is like such in it looks like the little ducky kind of whatever thing.
Yeah.
That looked supposedly like a dog in the books.
Yeah.
But whoever made the concept art was like, this will look so much funnier if it looks like this, and it'll be cuter, and it would work. Have you ever done that?
I've done stuff like a little bit, not with so many famous IPs. Like I've done the Star Wars stuff that I've done. They like know what characters they want. It would actually be amazing to get an opportunity to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm kind of doing that a lot. Like when years ago I helped the Mall of America has an aquarium, and it's like
with the tube underneath,
with the tube and everything like that. But they wanted to revamp it and stuff, and so they needed to completely change the areas, and they wanted these like aquatic characters to be like at your certain aspects of the tour, I guess, that you go through. Okay. And they didn't have those characters, so I've created that kind of stuff. But like in terms of like pre-existing IPs and stuff like that, I don't get to do too much of that. I did this book called Howling Commandos of S.H.I.E.L.D. For Marvel, which was they basically took all the Marvel monsters and they put them on like a team of
like
S.H.I.E.L.D. team. Like kind of, exactly that.
Cool.
And so that was one of my first times of, they were like, we want this girl who's like an Egyptian girl, a mummy, like a living mummy. And so that was one of my first times I got to create something that had never existed in like Marvel or DC.
Yeah.
And that was super cool. So now that character exists, and I wish I could say they've used her a lot, but like she pops up every now and then, and people have already tweaked her costume and stuff like that, which is to be expected. But so no, I wish I would love to get more. That's why you do like Devil's Highway and create her own books where it's like your own playground and stuff and your own sandbox, and you get to create these characters from scratch.
Yeah, but I mean, how epic would that be to be able to like make a basically Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, except of the Star Wars universe, where you just make the encyclopedia with the illustrations of every creature that's ever been featured or talked about.
Right.
It would be so sick because there's not that much concept art for a lot of that stuff.
Right.
Okay, only a couple more questions because I know we got to get going soon. This is just for anyone who's an artist out there trying to actually make money and deal with clients. I've run into it where people owe me money and it sucks.
Yeah.
But asking for everything up front also kind of sucks.
Yeah,
what is kind of standard practice, and how does billing work? Is it 50% up front, 50% when it's done, or like all of it up front?
It varies actually from client to client. Like if I did Scholastic, they often pay you half up front and half when it's done, or maybe a little less or something. Sometimes if it's a long project too, they'll break it up into thirds.
Yeah.
Marvel and DC, it's great because like if I'm doing each comic book, like the floppy comic is like 22 pages. You can talk to your editor sometimes and like bill like, hey, I've got 5 pages done. Is it cool if I bill? And they're like, okay, or halfway through you can bill. When you're doing with something like General Mills and stuff like that, unless it's like I've rarely had a project that's lasted longer than like 4 or 5 days with that stuff. I just know in good faith that they're going to pay. So I just wait till the end. But then I've been always a person who I like working with startup businesses and stuff like that. Like I really enjoy working with small businesses and trying to help them out and stuff like that. Then that's when I'm like, okay, I kind of need a little scratch up front just to make sure we both got a little skin in the game now and stuff like that. And so that way it doesn't just, I do all this work. I hand off files and stuff. Cause when I was younger, I remember one of my first freelance projects. It was called DJ Bass Mix 2000. I was in college.
Okay.
And it was for $800, which $800 as a sophomore or whatever I was.
For your art, you're like,
it might as well have been $2,000, $3,000, whatever.
Yeah.
And I remember I did it, and I had to hound after this guy to get after it. $800 we're talking, but in college that was a couple kegs, man.
Yeah.
And I finally got it, and then I was talking to an instructor about it, and that's when he was really great about breaking down like, okay, couple things. One, you should get money, half of it up front, or two, you never send them the final working file until you get paid, or something like that. And it's just kind of taking things to learn. And I've tweaked and modified and stuff like that over the years of like, just because I do so many different things, like I kind of have a few hard set rules, but then you kind of got to know who you're dealing with and stuff like that. So like I said, if it's a General Mills, I know they're good for it. If it's the startup vintage clothing store that wants some stuff, we're going to have to kind of figure something else out. So
I mean, it's just always hard to balance too, like as far as like where can you put your time and energy, because there's always going to be more and more projects that you want to do that aren't the dollar amount that you want, but also you want to spend time with your kids, but then you also want to be able to go to this convention, and it's just like figuring out where realistically you can put your time. Okay, coming to the end of the show, I want to get one more story out of you, but before that I want you to shout out 3 of your favorite artist friends that everybody should go check out right now.
Absolutely. Well, I have to go with Adam Turman here, who's kind enough to let us be in his space today. He's at Adam Turman on Instagram. There's another great Minnesota artist. She's a painter. She's got some stuff around here. Her name is DC Ice. She's incredibly talented, and she is at dc.ice on Instagram. And then the last one, I think he's got a great story. There's a guy named Spencer Johnson in town who started Soda Clothing here in town, and it's become this giant clothing brand. I kind of think of like our version of Drink Wisconsinably.
Sick,
so but they're at Soda Clothing on Instagram.
Okay, so I try to ask this on every episode. Sometimes I end up getting derailed because there's too much to talk about. But when you do something that you're passionate about for a living, you get to have really unique experiences that are rarely financially driven. Yeah, but they are what make all the hard work worth it. What's a story of an experience like that for you?
Okay, so this is part of a couple years ago. We went on a book tour for this Captain America book, which I know is part of the work. But going to libraries and then seeing kids come up to me and like want to show me their drawings and stuff like that, which reminded me when I was young and my dad took me to my first comic book convention, and I brought drawings to show the artists that were going to be there to get critiqued and get told what to do, what I could do better and stuff like that. I think that's the coolest. And I try to be very encouraging. It sounds funny, but like you go to a comic convention and obviously there's like young kids and then there's like teenagers and 20-year-olds who will show their portfolio to you and they want advice. And some people you try to be realistic with and stuff, but like for the kids, it's just always be encouraging of like artwork and stuff. And on that tour, I just had so many kids come and show me their original characters that they were created or their version of Captain America. And they would like the parents who are just like, I've got this kid. I'm not artistic, but he seems to really love it. What can I do to try to navigate him into continuing to do this if that's what he wants to do? And I don't know. I like to try to help them out because my parents were in that situation and my parents did a really good job. My job shadowed a guy named Tom Wojan, who he just drew cartoons in my dad's company newsletter. Okay. And he also would paint pinstripe on classic cars. He was very talented, and I spent a day with him in his studio, and that was a really big day for me, like probably in middle school, but I had never hung out a day with an artist before. So that was huge. And so I try to give those kids an opportunity. And if I have, like I just buy there's these website called Jet Pens where I get these pens that I love from Japan that I love inking and drawing with.
Okay.
And I always just keep a mound of them, and I bring a mound of them wherever I go because you never know if one's going to die. And if a kid is really into it, I'll just give them one of these pens and be like, I'm one of many creators who use these pens, so this is what we use. And try to give them something like a professional tool that they may not be able to just get at Walmart, Target, or Dick Blick or something like that.
Yeah,
so I love that part.
Necessarily know to even get in the first place.
Exactly.
Right?
You wouldn't. I mean, I didn't even know till like 8 years ago. I was telling these people, and I was like, "These are amazing," and they're like, "Yeah, you got to get them." So
yeah, I mean, just being aware of the impact that you can have on people, especially with kids. Like, you don't know what they're going to be capable of, even if their artwork isn't good at that moment.
For sure.
You don't know how good they're going to be. Everyone sucked at one point, anyways, and getting them excited, and they're like, "Oh, but I met this guy, and he was so cool." Like, you don't know how big of an impact you potentially could be having.
Well, and two, like if I have 2 kids in school now and I see like the way art programs are going and progressing in public schools, like a lot of it's getting cut for like more digital stuff, and I kind of lump it in with art, which I really get frustrated with. Like, I don't know, some kids even get to try painting in school, which is just terrible. And so I don't know if I see an opportunity to help a young kid just explore the arts and continue to be excited about it. I think it's important. I really think it's super important that even if you don't, I feel like, it's like every kid should have gym class. They may not love sports or whatever, but I think it's important for physical activity. I think the same goes with arts. It's very important. So
yeah, I think so. And far too many people don't do it. I didn't start painting till I was like 28.
Yeah.
And I really wish I would have started sooner. Let me give you a couple of gifts, and then we'll shout out what's going to be coming up next with you. So first off, you get to pick out one of these coffee mugs.
Ooh.
These are whichever one you want.
Oh,
there's
man.
This one, there's the one with the little skull logo, and then the little hitchhiker one.
I got to go with this one. I love this one.
Oh, yeah, that's the newest one. And that's to go along with your coffee. So the coffee in front of you is from Minimum Wage Tim's, which is actually available in Minneapolis.
Is it really?
Yeah, he's a Minneapolis dude. Like, he lives here.
That's amazing.
Was hanging out with him on Tuesday.
Looks like he's got a sweet mustache, too.
Yeah, and he makes all the beans himself, or he
does he
brews them. But what is it called when you make the beans when you cook them?
Meth.
Meth. Oh God. No. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But anyway, so he makes that coffee. And then these are from Skull Candy.
What?
Those are for you. Those are the newest Dime Evo headphones, and they come with little clips so you can clip them on your bag or whatever. So you always got on you.
I actually needed a new pair of headphones, and these are so cool. So thank you.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Absolutely. Okay. So give a shout out where everyone can find you. I know Instagram's the main place, and what should people be looking out for from you coming up?
All right. On Instagram, I'm at bscooneyart, but I also have really loved if you people start signing up for my newsletter. I don't put it out too often, but at BrentSchoonover.com, you scroll to the bottom, you can sign up for that. What do I have coming up right now? Well, I'm packing a whole bunch of AC/DC posters I just sold, and that's always fun. I have a couple of disc golf discs because I'm a big disc golfer. I've got that. I'm currently working on a couple comic book projects I wish I could talk about, but I'm like in this weird lull where I can't really talk about too much stuff. I am going to be at San Jose Comic-Con in August, which I'm super excited about. I've never been there. I'm also going to be at the Des Moines Comic-Con in September. I've never been to the Des Moines Comic-Con, so those are a couple appearances that I've got coming up, and yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now. So
dope, dude. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. And Schooney Art is SCHOONEY.
Yep.
That's how you spell Schooney.
Yep, at bscooneyart.com or at bscooneyart on Instagram. Too many ding comments. A place to reach out.
Perfect.
All right. Thank you so much. This was awesome.